I stood in my living room the other day looking out over the butterfly bush, which has grown all out of proportion in our front garden. It has become an oasis for butterflies. I saw a monarch there the other day, bees, and some weird thing that has a beak like a hummer and the body of a bee. I'm told it's a hummingbird moth. If I'm lucky, I might be visited by the scarlet tanager or the rose-breasted grosbeak. But best of all are the hummingbirds. They zoom and chatter and fight each other for territory and a space at the feeder. They stop on a dime and hover, and then zoom off to the nearby trees. They love this oasis. Dare I say it, coral head. And they rest in the bush, getting ready for the attack. I tried to count how many, and the most I got was 8 at a time. I think there might be a family, and I've found them in my identification book. They are ruby-throated hummers. I found myself laughing out loud at the tiny birds, and something felt so familiar. I thought for a minute that the butterfly bush might as well be a coral head, with fishes to observe as they flitter and fly through their lives. Only these fishes were birds. I want to talk about joy. The kind of joy that engulfs us in abandon, that takes over reason for a moment and requires a release of expression, that makes me stand in the middle of my living room and laugh out loud. Think of the baby playing peekaboo and laughing that full, rich baby belly laugh that nearly topples them over. Or the newlyweds on their wedding day, looking at each other with love and hope and expectation. Or the 3-year-old giggling while splashing in a puddle over and over again just because. Or maybe it's your dog anticipating you throwing the ball, leaping and quibbling and wagging their tail and entire backside. Joy. We all have it. Some of us forget where to find it or how to use it. But it's there, and I want to help you find that joy, even when, for whatever reason, you lose it. You can transform it. Maybe you find your joy in a perfectly curated fine wine enjoyed by the fire while tucked under a fluffy lap robe. Maybe you find your joy skiing down the middle of a field of moguls in the best snow you can imagine, or camping amid the monumental skyline of our national parks, or parasailing over a Caribbean blue ocean, or just looking out over that ocean from a warm spot safe on the beach. Joy. You have it. Take a moment to remember it. It may not be the same today as it was in days past, but it's still there. Scuba diving. That's my joy. I've often said that even if I could not see, I would still dive because the feeling of diving is as close to the feeling of flying like a bird that I would ever know. I love the feeling of collecting myself and my gear, taking a deep breath, and letting it all out while pushing down on my regulator to begin the descent through the deep blue. For a moment, everything is just blue. No up, no down, no reference. But I have trust, and I go with it. And suddenly, a dim sense of scenery comes into view. Perhaps it'll be a wreck to explore, or just a platform on which to conduct trainings. But if I'm lucky, it'll be a reef. Coral head after coral head of color and movement, a reef full of life and mystery and nooks and crannies to explore. I adjust my gear so that I am hovering just above the reef, neither touching the bottom nor floating to the surface. I control my buoyancy with my breath. A deep inhale, and I go up. A strong exhale, and I return. I can fly in this neutral state. I love to dive. So I watch as a tiny fish creates a beautiful pattern in the sand. A mandala, which is designed to entice a mate to find him and his home irresistible. I notice a moray eel poking out of his hidey hole, gasping, showing me his many layers of teeth. I watch, but I give him wide berth. I find lobsters or angelfish or squirrelfish poking out from under rocks, and I realize that this spot is their home. Maybe I count the many colors in a passing parrotfish, and I swim with filefish who flash their colors blue and gold as we continue down the reef. I fly over a coral head, and all the amphias or damselfish hanging out just above the coral suddenly swoop in to hide among the polyps. I love to dive. It is endlessly fascinating. It is endlessly flying. And if I can remain calm as the sharks swim past and the stingrays navigate above my head, I am rewarded by being considered just one of the bunch, an awkward-looking fish to be sure, but not something to be afraid of, just another creature. And as my reward, I slowly maneuver my way into a small school of barracuda. They are menacing and can be aggressive, but I mean them no harm, and before I know it, there are fish ahead of me, barracuda to the right and to the left, and when I slowly check, I see that they are behind me too. I did it. I'm in. But every dive comes to an end, and I ready myself to ascend. I check time and gear, adjust my breathing, and slowly begin to kick my way to my safety stop. There, I have a few moments to remember the dive. Photographers check their camera gear, and new divers excitedly try to tell each other without words what magic they have seen. It makes me grin just to think of the dive. It is my joy. And throughout the course of this dive, I have been completely consumed by the ocean. No thoughts of work or stresses of life, politics, to-do lists, or relationship issues. I have given my entire attention to the dive, and I am a happy girl. That is what diving meant. And then it was all taken from me. No more dives, no more reef, no colorful fish or sharks, no octopus, no rays, no feeling like flying. It was gone because of a brain tumor. And hey, I survived, so I can't complain too much. But I will never dive again. I think I went through all the stages of grief, disbelief and shock, denial, guilt and pain, bargaining, anger, depression, and finally acceptance. But as I look back on this enormous change in my life, I realize that acceptance has become adaptation, has become transition or transformation. I have transformed the joy I got by diving into a joy that is pervasive in all aspects of my life. Joy is a state of mind and an orientation of the heart. It is a settled state of contentment, confidence, and hope. It is something or someone that provides a source of happiness. Joy isn't just a smile or a laugh. Joy is something that is deep within and doesn't leave quickly. What is your joy? Where does your joy live in you? Have you transformed your joy? Take a moment to focus on what brings you joy. What is it about that perfectly curated wine by the fire that sings to you? What draws you back to ski those moguls? What sense of well-being do you find staring out over a Caribbean blue ocean? Well, I have a friend who did competition water skiing for much of his youth. He traveled and competed all over the East Coast. He loved it, but he says that as the years have passed, his flexibility, hips, and knees have given way to a more sedentary life. But he loves teaching his grandkids to water ski. He drives the boat, he picks them up when they fall, critiques their runs, and offers warm towels and cold watermelon on the ride home. He has transformed his joy into something new. The 13th century mystic poet Rumi said, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." So if joy is indeed a settled state of contentment, confidence, and hope, then my not being able to dive need not have plunged me into grief. I, too, could find a way to transition the joy I found diving to new moments of happiness. Happiness based on the state of mind and orientation of the heart that I once found in scuba diving. Joy transitioned comes with an understanding of self and a distillation of joy. Mine came after the grief and over time, without thinking about it, until one day I noticed that it was a transformation I could never have planned. Let me explain. One day I realized that I'm a natural leader. Of course I am. As a dive instructor, I would say to a group of terrified newbies, "Come, 40, 50, 60 feet underwater. You'll be safe with me." And the new divers would willingly follow because they recognized me as their leader. They felt comfortable, safe in my care. Today, I lead coming to the table groups all over our area and start new ones frequently. People are willing to have deep and difficult conversations about race, to be vulnerable about their relationship to racism and white supremacy because they see me as their leader. They trust me to provide a safe space and know I will have their back. The leadership that I learned diving has transitioned to a different kind of leadership. I realized that I was a teacher while teaching diving. Patience and empathy, compassion and creativity were all part of the arsenal of tricks when teaching a student to be comfortable underwater. That arsenal stood me in good stead when presenting a paper to a national surgical group, standing in front of 5,000 surgeons, all wondering what this non-MD had to offer. Nevertheless, because I am a teacher, I taught them something. Yes, I learned a lot from diving, and it has transitioned to my life. What about you? Does what brings you joy exist in its original form? Or have you too had a transformation, a transition? Can you find a way to make your once joyful practice, but now only a distant memory, a new practice of joyfulness? I believe you can, and I am proof. Transition is merely the process or period of changing from one state or condition to another. But the transition of joy requires more than merely changing. It requires that you dare to listen to your own truth. It requires you to find yourself, to know yourself, to have, as we heard in our reading of Mary Oliver's journey, the experience of knowing. The Journey is a poem of transition. It speaks of the moment when you dare to listen to your own truth and set sail into a new life. A new life requires a death of some kind, a letting go. When you let go, what you let go of is a way of being in the world that you have outgrown. The journey speaks to the birth of a new self, a deeper identity that was in you all along. This new self does not flee from the world, but walks deeply into it. This is a knowing which reveals the true meaning of your joy. It is a knowing that may remain hidden in your happiness, but then, one day, when you most need to experience the transition, when you are most willing to begin, it is then that your journey to transition is revealed. Knowing yourself, trusting yourself, requires that you move on from the past, perhaps move on from the comfortable and safe. You must take the first step. Though doubt and uncertainty surround you, you must be willing to put the past aside and leap. Leap into a new place, trusting that your joy will transition to new and ever-exciting happiness. Start walking. Start walking toward your teacher. Your legs will get heavy and tired, and then comes the moment of feeling the wings you've grown lifting. And yet again, I am flying. True, I cannot dive, but I have learned that my joy was always much more than the dive. I have transitioned my joy and integrated it into my everyday life. And when I close my eyes and open my heart, I find that yet again I am flying. I observe the butterfly bush and the hummers, and I know that these birds have become my fishes. What about you? Can you find that place where your joy is transitioned? You can find that place. Rumi tells us, when you do things from the soul, you feel a river moving in you, a joy. May it be so.